we're turning our attention to the Women's Euros with the quarter-final starting tonight as England play Spain. I'm delighted to say we're joined in the line now by the former Republic of Ireland manager Sue Ronan to talk through the 4 matches. Sue, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
How are you? How are you keeping?
Good, yeah. I don't know, is it a fear really anymore? I think probably it's really good for the women's game if England do win this competition, particularly given a lot of our best players are going to end up playing league football with them next season. But there's a few hard games for them to navigate, and the Spanish team who stand in England's way tonight might put it up to them.
Yeah, I definitely think, to answer your first question, I definitely think it would be good for the game if England win the tournament. I think it would be good for us here. It would definitely have a knock-on effect. We have many of our players playing in the league over there, as you know, and I suppose that's the first port of call for many of them looking to go professional. It's close by, it's there's no language barriers, you know, it's close to home, no food barriers, all those type of things, and it's the best league in the world, more importantly. But going back to the second question, I mean, they have been by far the strongest team in the competition so far, and it's been a fantastic competition. Records have tumbled on and off the pitch. You know, there's been record high attendances, numbers of goals scored, numbers of searches on website, number of attendances, all that type of thing. But more importantly, the football has been absolutely superb. I mean, it's gone up a level. Every major tournament, we're seeing it go up a notch. And England are certainly the front runners in that, or the leaders in that. And yes, they have a tough game, a tough quarter-final against Spain. Spain play a different style of football. They play the typical Spanish, you know, short, small, intricate passing, very Barcelona style. Many of their players actually play for Barcelona. But they've struggled to score in this tournament, and they're missing 2 of their key players. They're missing Hermosa, who's their out-and-out number 9, and the Ballon d'Or player, Patelas, their number 10, both injured just before the tournament. So they're huge losses to them. But, you know, watching them, I watched them live against Germany, and Germany were just so clinical against them and ruthless. 2 chances, and they were 2-0 up in no time. Spain probably had a lot of the ball, most of the ball that game. But they didn't really penetrate the final third. You know, it was, as I mentioned, all that short, sharp passing. We're going lateral across the pitch. So I can't really see them hurting this England team. I think England have too many goals in them. They can score from anywhere. They can spring players from the bench who are really performing just as well as the starting 11. England are going to have a huge crowd, a noisy crowd. They're on a high. So, yeah, for me, I think England are going to win this game.
Is there any concern that England haven't quite been tested by the opponents that they faced yet? I mean, they should have been, but it turns out they were too strong for their opponents so far.
Yeah, for sure. They haven't been tested defensively. I mean, they beat Norway 8-0, and that was the game I suppose everyone thought they were going to be tested in. They struggled a little bit more against Austria. It was only 1-0, and Austria did go at them, you know, put it up to them early doors. And then they beat Northern Ireland well. I think the centre of the defence for me has been a bit soft over the years. You know, that's been their Achilles heel. They're so good in midfield. Their top 4 or 5 players are so good. As I mentioned, you could play any player there. You know, 1-4 could play this game, and another 4 from the bench could play the next game, and they'd be equally as strong and equally as good. And they're scoring goals from everywhere. So they haven't been tested. So what way they'll set up, I'm not really sure. You know, Spain will go at them anyway. Spain won't sit in and sit in the defensive block and hope to catch them on the counter-attack. That's not the way they play. Whereas, you know, when England are defending, they're quite likely to be able to catch Spain on the counter, because that's where teams have been catching them, and that's where Germany caught them. But pardon me, they haven't been tested, so it'll be interesting to see how they cope with that. But I do just think they're getting stronger and more confident as the tournament's going on.
It's going to be a good, very good kind of advertisement of the game as well, this.
For sure, it really is. And as I said, when you look at the level of football and the way it's been played, I mean, Lauren Hemp, who plays wide, and normally wide on the left, but she can switch to wide on the right. She's only 21 years of age, and she's won Young Player of the Year for the last 4 years in a row in the Women's Super League. And what a talent she is. And she'd remind you of the old-fashioned centre forward. You know, she has pace. She gets down the line, gets crosses in off her right foot, off her left foot, pinpoint crosses. And you'd love to be a centre forward, you know, playing with her in the team. You have Georgia Stanway, who was the captain of the under-20s when they got beaten in the World Cup final in 2019, and I think she's one of their underestimated players. She's driving that team on from the number 10 position, or the advanced midfield position. probably not getting all the limelight that some of the others do, but she stepped up now and taken, I think, 2 penalties in this tournament, no problem, put them away for a young girl, only 20, 21 years of age. But yeah, I mean, I think that the football they're playing, football many of the teams are playing, it's really superb and it's great to see.
Just the hurling on Sunday, Sue, like you can imagine future Limerick hurlers are 8 or 9 years of age now celebrating on Sunday, and they have their dreams now. Like a lot of Galway hurlers would have come through from watching the team that Joe Canning and all that. There must be some amount of young kids who are like so inspired by this and who are going to be like make it their goal now to be a professional footballer and to play for their country down the line.
Absolutely, and of course you see that in England because they're doing so well and there's such a high profile to the game over there, but you're also seeing it now here as well because our own national team, there's such a high profile around them. They're playing such great football, they're connected to the fans, as we mentioned the last time I was here. So you know, kids can see it now, and we always use that tagline, you can't see it, you can't be it, and they absolutely can see it. And you know, the fact they're seeing such great football on the TV. I mean, I have my own nieces even who don't play football, but they're so inspired by watching girls playing in a full stadium, you know, and everything that goes with what you would normally see in a men's game. And that for sure does inspire them. And I mean, I heard it was a Peter O'Mahony after the All Blacks, or Ireland beat the All Blacks last week. That was the first thing he said when he was interviewed. This is going to inspire the next generation. And that's what happens, you know.
Yeah, they obviously feel that and they obviously speak about that too, and I'm sure that's been part of the whole thing about this England team and a home tournament and legacy. The one kind of little wrinkle for all this is that their manager tested positive for COVID last week and wasn't on the bench for the last game. Talk that she might be on the bench for the game tonight. I haven't seen an update on that just yet, but is that important? It kind of feels like it might be important.
Yeah, you know, if she's not on the bench, she is a big loss. I did hear yesterday she may not be, but I'm not sure. I think the isolation period in England is a little bit different than here, so potentially if she tests negative, she may be. But she is a loss. But from what I gather, like she's still keeping connected. I'm sure she's still at team meetings, you know, via virtually as such. She obviously can't be on the training pitch, I'm sure, or I don't know, maybe she can be in isolation, but I'm sure she's not. But yes, she's a big loss. But look, I think her assistants and her whole team around her, you know, they've all worked together for a long time. I'm sure she's still directing the show, and they're just such a close-knit team now, and they know exactly what they want. And she's just brought something else to them that they didn't have before. So it will be a loss for sure. I think especially if things are not going right, maybe, you know, she's the one that can change it. But I think from listened to Arya and her assistant after the last match, he was connected to her during the whole game, and I'd imagine that'd be the same thing if she's not there tonight.
What system does she play? Is she stereotypical Dutch?
Yeah, she seems to play that Dutch system, the 4-3-3, but it's a flexible one. You know, you can have 2 holding midfielders with 3 advanced and then 1 top striker, or you can have your wide players high and wide, and you know, with 2 advanced midfielders, which she tends to do. She's had Fran Kirby and Georgia Stanway in 2 advanced, say 8 and 10 roles, with Ciara Walsh as being the holding player just in front of the centre halves. Her fullbacks get forward, as the Dutch fullbacks always do. And I mean, that's a trend in the game now anyway. Fullbacks are really a big part of the attack and play. And then obviously there's a lot of movement up front. You know, as I said, these players are so good. They're all versatile. The wingers can change sides. Centre forward tends to stay. Ellen White tends to stay centrally. Obviously, if she's up front on her own, she'll make runs into the channels, but you don't see her playing out in the wing for any period of time. But yeah, like they really are. They're a very, very strong team, and they're flamboyant and they're versatile and they're fluid. You know, so it really is. It's a pleasure to watch them.
So they're going to win tonight. That's your prediction?
I think they will win tonight. Yeah, I can't see them not scoring goals. You know, and will Spain even score? I'm not even sure Spain will score. I can see them winning maybe 2-0 or 3-1 tonight.
And England and Germany are different sides as Ross is that right?
Yes, they are. So, again, you know, I suppose for the tournament, that's lucky because they're the best 2 teams in the tournament to date, although the French might have a different view on that. But again, I saw Germany live twice there in Brentford in the group games, and straight, I hadn't seen Germany for a few years, and you're probably aware they would have won the Euros 5 times in a row, like up between, I think, 2003, 2015. Then they went into a bit of a downward spiral. They've had to rebuild. They've had a couple of different coaches, all sorts of things. And every team, I guess, goes through eventually. So they weren't really getting anywhere in major tournaments. Quarterfinals was the furthest they were getting. I think in the last Euros and the last World Cup, that's as far as they got. And surprisingly, they were beaten actually in a World Cup game there in the last couple of months against Serbia, which is unheard of. But I've since read they had a lot of players missing with COVID and different things, but they're still winning that World Cup group. But I was just struck by how they looked like their old selves. You know, they were strong, they were powerful, they were physical, they were slick in their passing, they were direct, you know, clinical, ruthless, all that type of thing. So for me, they're the second best team in the tournament at the moment. Austria, who they play, that's tomorrow night. Austria have done really great to qualify, as you mentioned, from England's group against all the odds, especially at the expense of that highly fancied Norway team. But do they have enough to upset Germany? And most of their players play in Germany, so they'll be familiar, but I don't think they really do. I mean, their only key player, I guess, or their main key player is their goalkeeper who plays for Arsenal as well, and she's done really well, but I think Germany will have too much for them.
It's interesting about the German rebuild. It's obviously, you know, from a massive playing base and with the background of the success that they've had. But like all these teams do struggle at some point. When they play England, if they play England in the final, who would end up being the favourites heading into that game?
I think England are still the favourites. So the home nation. I think they could even be ranked ahead of Germany just at the moment. I think England will probably be favourites. Well, put it this way, their own press would definitely make them favourites, and with that will come more pressure, of course. But you can never rule out Germany, and like what Germany have, England don't have. Germany have experience of winning those tournaments, and the last time England were in the European finals, it was 2009, and again I was at that game, and they were destroyed by Germany in the first half. I think they were 4-0 down before they could even blink. Now they were at a different level than they are now, and Germany were at a different level. You know, they're opposite ends of the spectrum, but England had big hopes going into the tournament, and of course they had that pressure from home that they were going to do something, but within a blink of an eye the game was over. They eventually lost 5-2. You had the great Birgit Prince playing in those days. So Germany know how to win tournaments, you know, and nobody's been talking about them coming into this. So I think that's been in their favour. They're sort of quietly going about their business. Yeah. But I still think England will be favourites, and everyone will make them the favourites. But look, when it gets to that stage, anything can happen. Yeah. I still think England will win, but you can't rule the Germans out.
The hype would be off the chart if that was to happen, if could have an England-Germany final. Sweden against Belgium. This game you think is going to be pretty close?
I think so. This one could go all the way to penalties. I think Sweden haven't been firing on all cylinders. And so this game really is the most open of all the quarterfinals for me. It's interesting. Sweden, the teams that they've played apart from Portugal have sat deep against them, obviously, you know, trying to contain the Swedes and trying to get a result. And Sweden have really found it hard to break them down. Their top players haven't performed at the top level yet. Blackstenius, who's with Arsenal, you know, great young player who normally scores goals for fun. I think she might have scored one to date. Aslani, who's with Real Madrid, Rolfo, Barcelona, those players, Eriksson, their captain, who's with Chelsea. You know, they just haven't hit the ground running just yet, but they do get better as tournaments go on. I mean, they've got to this stage now, and that's all you need to do. You don't have to set the world on fire, I guess, in the quarters or in the group games. It matters now in the knockout games. But against Belgium, who will sit deep against them and who sat deep against Italy until they had to go and win the game, it'll be an interesting one, this one. So I think this could go to extra time and penalties.
All right, and then France versus Netherlands is the fourth quarter final. And the good thing is that these are night by night, so there's no double games at this stage. You get to watch all of them.
For sure, and they're a nice time for people to watch as well after work, 8 o'clock kickoff. France have a very exciting team and loads of exciting players. You've Cascarino up front, Diani, the pace they have in the wide positions. Their striker who's starting to score goals, Kitato. I mean, there was controversy about her. She was left out of the World Cup squad, but she's back in this time. But France, you know, for me, France have a bit of a soft centre. I'm not sure they have the bottle or the metal, whatever you want to say, to actually go to go as far as their team suggests they can. Something just seems to happen to them when the pressure's on them and everyone expects them to do better. There's always seems to be a bit of conflict with French teams as well, and those players left out, and some players think they should be in, and the manager obviously picks who she thinks is right for the squad. So there just seems to be a bit of a conflict there. Will they beat the Netherlands? I think that'll be a close one as well. It's hard to call that one because the Netherlands likewise haven't been firing on all cylinders yet. But again, they know how to win tournaments. They've won the 2017 edition. Miedema will be important for them. She's missed now the last 2 games with COVID. It'll be interesting to see how fit she is. I hear they just lost Martins through injury. Now, she wasn't playing well anyway. She'd been out, I think, for a year with injury, so maybe not too much of a loss at the moment. Their goalkeeper has really stood up. She came in for their captain in the first game who went off injured, and she's Van Domselaar. She's looked really good. So hard to call that one. Really hard to call that one, to be honest with you. I'd say it'll go to extra time, and I couldn't even call who's going to win it, to be honest with you, at the moment.
The Norwegian manager stepped down during the week after his team crashed out.
Yes.
Bit of a surprise that they crashed out so early, but I suspect that if you have a team as talented as that and you don't do much with them, then it's kind of inevitable that you're going to end up leaving.
I think so, yeah. And I think also the way they were beaten, the 8-0 by England really hurt them and would have hurt him a lot and hurt his reputation, I guess, because there was a lot said about the fact he didn't make changes during the game and all that. They were hammered, like they were destroyed by England. They really were. It's just like they fell apart. So they didn't just lose, like they were hammered. So I'm not surprised that change has happened, to be honest. Okay.
So much made of Aga Hegerberg in the build-up, but didn't really perform in the tournament?
No, she didn't. And she didn't look... she didn't. There was so much made of her, and she came back. Obviously, as we know, she retired after the last Euros from international duty because I think she said things weren't right there within the camp or the Norwegian backing or whatever. I don't know what was going on, but anyway, she came back and she seemed to be doing well. She seemed to have settled in, but she never looked comfortable to me. I think her demeanour, even besides the game against England, I just thought there wasn't something right. Now I could be wrong there, but. She definitely didn't perform anyway, and none of the team did. So it's interesting to see what happens there next.
How would we have done if we qualified here?
Do you know what? I've been saying this to myself, and I think we would have done well. Obviously, the group we would have been in, if you look at it the way it was, because Northern Ireland beat Ukraine in the playoff, and we were beaten by Ukraine. So you take it that we would be in that group. England are definitely on a different level. I think at the moment we would struggle against them like all teams do. Certainly the way Norway have played and the way we're playing at the moment, I wouldn't have feared them. And, I definitely wouldn't have feared Northern Ireland. And that's no disrespect to them. I think we've beaten them on every occasion we've played them for the last 10 years. I think we would have done well. And I look at teams that have come in maybe under the radar, like Austria, like Belgium, and they've performed really well, and other teams you would expect to have done better, like Norway, like Italy, they've been huge disappointment. Finland again, another team, and again we talked about it before, these teams were good second seeds a number of years ago. They're now on the slide for me, and we're a team on the up, so I definitely think we would have done well.
If you look at Sweden qualifying for the quarterfinals, like we've played twice against Sweden, They beat us once and we drew with them. We're not a million miles away here from this.
We're not a million miles away here. And again, we said it before, we just need to make that breakthrough, and the team is playing with such confidence at the moment and such conviction, and they don't fear anybody, so I think going into a tournament now wouldn't faze them. And you think about what would happen if they did qualify, I'm sure they'd have months of preparation together and all that. So yeah, we just need to get there, and I think we would definitely quit ourselves well. And if we did qualify for the World Cup, it's harder to get to the World Cup because 8 or 10 teams come from Europe out of the 32. But when you get there, the group stages are potentially actually a little bit easier. If 32 teams, so you'd have a round of 16, obviously, but you're in with teams from the other confederations, and some of the other confederations are definitely much weaker than Europe.
That's echoed in the men's game now, Susan, where basically it's kind of easier to win the Euros than the World Cup.
I see it like in the job and the work I'm doing with FIFA. I mean, OFC, Oceania, take for example, New Zealand have qualified for the World Cup as hosts. So therefore you've got the 10 other countries, and they're the likes of the Cook Islands, Solomon Islands, Tahiti, New Caledonia, countries like this, who literally only get together for their qualification tournament. They only appoint, most of them only appoint their national team coach and activate the national team coming up to the qualification tournament. Now, that's something we're trying to change, because that's not good. Obviously, it's not good for the national team, and it's obviously not good for the development of football in those countries. But that's the level they're at. So one of those is going to have a half chance of going to the World Cup, because they'll go into that Confederation playoff that we could potentially end up in. But one of them could make the World Cup. So, really, if we did get to a World Cup, I think it's definitely easier than the Euros.
Right. There's a lot to look forward to. One last thing I want to ask you about is, we've talked about Hegerberg there. Who has impressed you then?
Who's impressed me in the tournament so far? I've been really impressed with Hegering. I think that's the way you pronounce her name. Marina Hegering from Germany, centre half. Again, watched her close up, and I was just blown away with her. I hadn't realised she'd been at Arsenal a year or so ago, and I think she didn't maybe do well there. But she was just a super centre half, no nonsense, out and out defender, read the game well, really good distributor of the ball, strong player. She really impressed me. And then in the English team, I think, you have the stars, the Meads, the Hemps, but a couple of the unsung heroes for me are those not getting maybe the same limelight. Walsh has been very good in the middle of the park. Kira Walsh, she's dictating the play, as is that youngster Stanway that I mentioned. So they've really been impressive for me so far.
All right, Sue, great stuff. Enjoy the rest of it. Thanks a million. We'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.